Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Daniel, and today in this video we'll be covering another chess.com trading game I played. This time I was playing the black pieces, and let's take a look at what happened. So e4, c5, Sicilian. Here my opponent goes for c3, trying to play d4 at some point. F6. My opponent actually elects to go for d3, which is another variation. I go for my typical dragon setup here. Here castles, all pretty standard. Here I play queen b6 to attack this b2 pawn, and ideas of like knight g4 in the future. If this bishop moves off the diagonal, then I have like c4 maybe at some point. So queen d2, I immediately pursue this bishop. This bishop's usually pretty important for the attack, like some bishop h6 ideas I'm envisioning, like f5, bishop h6, knight g5, opening up to my king. So here I immediately capture the bishop and just develop my own bishop. Here knight a3, trying to go knight to c4. Here, I guess this starter technically loses a move, but here I play bishop e6 to simply prevent knight c4, because here I can simply capture. Instead, my opponent plays h3, setting up g4. So here I actually play the move f5, which actually isn't that good. In fact, it's kind of like a blunder. Reason being is because my opponent has the move knight g5. And after bishop d7, here my opponent can play e captures on f5, and after g captures on f5, this structure here is a little bit suspicious. Like after something like knight to c4, queen to c2. Here I do have like b4 ideas, but this structure doesn't look the best. Like after bishop f3, let's say I play b4, then here there's even ideas of playing bishop d5 check, and after king to h8, you can't play e6, sorry, because there's bishop takes. After king h8, then here there's like, you can bring your knight back just to prevent the knight from being captured, and then you can jump in with your knight into f7 and then cause a lot of havoc to black's position. However, here my opponent plays knight c4, and after queen c7, now I'm actually threatening b5 here. Here my opponent actually plays knight e3, which actually isn't that good, because here I can simply play the move e6. My idea is to put my knight on d7, so once captures, I can capture with the knight. And if you capture now, which my opponent did in the game, then I simply play g captures on f5. I can't play e takes because then I allow knight d5, and then this knight can't really be removed unless I have to trade off a bishop for it, and I can't even put the bishop on e6 because there's a knight controlling e6. So g takes, and this is also fine because I can try to push d5 or e5 at some point. So here my opponent plays rook e1, I play h6, kicking this knight back to f3, and here I play knight e7, trying to put my knight on g6 to attack this f4 pawn. Here my opponent plays g4, which is in my mind a bit of an overextending a little bit, because after f takes, you'll see that my rook is open up to the f4 square, f4 pawn. So you can't actually capture back with the pawn, because then you hang rook captures on f4. So you have to capture with the knight, at which point your king is basically equally exposed as my king. Like before, my king was low on defenses, but now his king is equally weak because he couldn't capture back with the pawn. And here I play h5, which in my mind is quite important, but the computer doesn't fully agree, but it's still not a bad move. Idea is that this knight is pretty short on squares. It can't go to h6, f6, or e5. It can go back to h2, but that's really passive, and it can also go back to e3. The drawback with going back to e3, which my opponent did in the game, is now I have rook captures on f4. I win this pawn, and I'm ready to double up on the f-file, and maybe play king h8 at some point, and maybe even play rook g8 and just start trying to attack the king at d5, etc. Here my opponent goes wrong with the move knight to d5. This straight up this looks like it hangs a piece, but after knight takes there is c4, and I can't move this knight without hanging the rook, so I do lose the piece back. However, here I do get like a couple of free moves to get my plan exactly. With like rook f8, I double up on this file. This knight can't move anymore because then I would capture on f2. And once you take, I win another pawn because you had to take my knight with the pawn and I capture back. So now I'm up 2 pawns. And basically my position is completely dominant. Like if you look at white's pieces here, they're all stuck in like this cube. Whereas my pieces, they're ready to get active. My queen can swing over at some point. This bishop has some pin ideas in the future. Basically my position is just completely winning for and I'm also up 2 pawns. King g2. I play bishop c6. My idea is to play d4 at some point, and so I have this pin going. Here my opponent plays king h2, which allows me to play d4 anyway. This was part of my plan. Now I'm actually threatening to win the knight. Here my opponent actually plays rook g1, and just straight up gives me the piece. Bishop takes, and rook takes. And here rook g2, and here I envisioned this, and I played the move d5 check. You can't block with the rook because I can simply take, and after rook takes, I mean, you survive, but then I have like rook f3, like let's say rook g3, I can trade. And then I have like rook f3 because you can't take here because I'm pinning the rook to the king. After something like queen g2, here I can like play rook captures, queen takes, and king takes, and just play bishop f6 to prevent the king from going to h4, king f4, king f7, king f5, and here like b5 for example. And here I'm just simply up a bishop as well as I believe 2 pawns here because I have 5 pawns on the queen side and he only has 2 here. So this is just completely winning. There's no way to target this h5 pawn because my bishop and all of these pawns perfectly support all of these squares and prevents the king from being able to attack them. And so I'm also up a bishop, so it's cleanly winning. So instead here my opponent goes king h1, I play rook captures on h3, and here I simply simplified the position down to me being up a bishop, and both sides have a rook, but here after rook f2 check, my opponent indeed actually ended up resigning the game here, seeing as I'm going to win b2, and probably a2, and d3 at some point, and then I would have 5 connected passed pawns here on the queen side, all rolling down the board, and very simply it would be winning, combined with the fact I have an extra bishop. So here my opponent chose to resign. If you block with the rook to prevent the pawn, I'll simply trade, and here I probably even get a better version of what I showed earlier. King here, king f4, and my king is even closer now, so this is even more winning pretty much. Like, there's nothing really for white to do, there's nothing really even to show, because I'm just simply up too much material. So this game, another pretty swift victory after rook f2 check, 34 moves only. Managed to defend firstly, in the opening stages, prevented any form of really big attack by trading off this knight for this bishop. This knight wasn't going to do anything on f6 besides getting kicked around with like h3, g4, g5. So I immediately went to trade it off for this bishop, which will serve a great purpose in the attack. And it turns out white didn't actually end up getting any form of attack, and despite my king looking relatively open, it was still pretty safe, had a lot of pieces surrounding it, and managed to capitalize on my opponent's mistake in the middle game, basically allowing him to weaken his own king, and then winning a pawn. And then here another tactical error by my opponent, knight d5, and then I was able to get pretty much everything I wanted in the position and ended up converting a very nice win. So yeah, hope you all enjoyed this game, and thanks for watching.